Cerberus. Cerberus is the original bouncer of the ancient world, and he's never once let anyone leave. In Greek mythology, this three-headed dog stands guard at the entrance to Hades, the realm of the dead, allowing souls to enter freely but tearing apart anyone foolish enough to try walking back out. His parentage alone tells you everything about his nature. He is the son of Typhon and Echidna, two of the most terrifying beings in all of Greek cosmology. According to Hesiod, each of his three heads is said to see in different directions, ensuring there is no blind spot, no angle of escape. His body is described with a serpent for a tail, and snakes bristling along his back like living armor. Despite his reputation, Cerberus has been defeated a small number of times across mythology. Heracles dragged him out of Hades barehanded as one of his 12 labors, Orpheus lulled him to sleep with music, and Psyche pacified him with a honey cake. The fact that some of history's greatest heroes needed music, tricks, and divine assistance just to get past the door guard says everything about what Cerberus represents. Death is a one-way road, and this creature is the lock on the gate. Charon. If Cerberus is the lock, Charon is the toll booth, and he does not accept anything other than exact change. In Greek mythology, Charon is the skeletal ferryman who transports the souls of the recently dead across the river Styx, or, depending on the source, the river Acheron, to the entrance of Hades. The fee is a single coin called an obol, and this belief was so deeply embedded in ancient Greek culture that the living placed coins on the eyes or inside the mouths of their dead before burial to ensure safe passage. Souls who arrived without a coin, or whose bodies had not been properly buried, were left to wander the near shore for 100 years before Charon would take them. Virgil describes him in the Aeneid as ancient beyond reckoning, filthy, with eyes like burning coals, a tangle of white beard, and a rotting boat that somehow still holds the weight of countless dead. He is not cruel so much as utterly indifferent. Payment received, you cross; payment missing, you wait. That transactional coldness, the idea that even death has a bureaucracy, made Charon one of the most enduring figures in all of ancient mythology. Hades. Hades is not just a ruler, it is an entire geography of the afterlife, and it is far more organized than most people realize. According to Greek tradition, the realm is divided into distinct regions based on the quality of a soul's life. Elysium and the Isles of the Blessed receive heroes and the exceptionally virtuous, described as a land of eternal sunlight and peace. The Asphodel Meadows, by far the largest section, hold the vast majority of ordinary souls who were neither especially good nor especially wicked. They wander there in a gray, emotionless haze for eternity. Tartarus, the deepest pit in all of existence, receives the damned, and Hesiod writes that it sits so far beneath Hades that a bronze anvil dropped from the surface would fall for 9 full days before hitting bottom. 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, review each soul and assign it accordingly. 5 rivers run through the realm: the Styx, oath-binding; the Acheron, woe; the Lethe, forgetting; the Phlegethon, fire; and the Cocytus, lamentation. Drinking from the Lethe erases all memory of life, which souls do before reincarnation. It is a complete self-contained world built entirely around what you deserved. Erinyes. The Erinyes are older than the Olympian gods, and they were never under their authority. Born from the blood of Uranus when Cronus castrated him, these 3 goddesses of vengeance, Alecto, whose name means unceasing anger; Megara, meaning jealousy; and Tisiphone, meaning revenge for murder, predate the entire divine order that Zeus would later establish. They inhabit Tartarus but are not confined to it, pursuing their targets across both the living world and the realm of the dead. Their jurisdiction is specific: oathbreakers, murderers, and those who violated the natural order of family and hospitality. They are described with serpents for hair, bat wings, eyes that weep blood, and an appearance so horrifying that witnesses in ancient plays were reported to faint at their theatrical portrayal. The ancient Greeks were so afraid of offending them that they avoided using their true name in everyday speech, calling them instead the Eumenides, the kindly ones, as a form of appeasement. Aeschylus built an entire trilogy, the Oresteia, around what happens when the Erinyes pursue Orestes for killing his own mother. Even the gods negotiated with them rather than command them. That is the measure of what they are. Seraphim. The Seraphim appear only once in the Hebrew Bible in Isaiah chapter 6, and that single description has shaped theological imagination for over 2,000 years. Isaiah describes beings surrounding the throne of God, each possessing 6 wings, 2 covering their faces, 2 covering their feet, and 2 used for flight. The covering of their own faces is significant. These are beings so powerful and so close to the divine that even they cannot look directly at what they serve. Their name derives from the Hebrew root meaning to burn, and they are described as literally blazing, radiant creatures whose cry of "Holy, holy, holy" shakes the very doorposts of heaven. Isaiah describes one of them taking a burning coal from the altar and pressing it to his lips to purify him before he could speak as a prophet. Almost nothing else is recorded about them in canonical scripture. They do not speak at length, they do not go to war, they do not interact with humans again in that text. Their entire existence, as described, is the act of worship. Later, Christian theology expanded them into the highest rank of a 9-tiered angelic hierarchy, but in their original appearance they are simply overwhelming. Burning presences at the edge of something too large to describe. Apsaras. Apsaras are the celestial dancers of Svarga, the Hindu heavenly realm, and they are far more dangerous than they look. Described in texts ranging from the Rigveda to the Mahabharata as supernatural female beings of extraordinary beauty, they inhabit the divine court and perform for the gods, but their most strategically important role is as agents of Indra, the king of the heavens. When a sage or hero on earth grew so powerful through meditation and austerity that their accumulated spiritual energy began to threaten the balance of heaven itself, Indras would dispatch an Apsara to seduce them, break their concentration, and dissipate their power. The strategy worked often enough to become a recurring motif across Hindu epic literature. Urvashi and Menaka are among the most famous named Apsaris, the latter famously sent to distract the sage Vishwamitra. They are associated with clouds, rivers, and music, and are said to move like flowing water. In Buddhist tradition, they also appear in heavenly realms, including the Tusita heaven and the Pure Land. The Khmer Empire carved their image across the walls of Angkor Wat in the 12th century, and those carvings survive today, hundreds of individual Apsaras, each with a slightly different face. Valkyries. Valkyrie means, in Old Norse, chooser of the slain, and that title is the most accurate description of what they do. These armored female figures ride across battlefields on divine horses, and their task is not to fight but to decide, specifically, to decide which of the dead are worthy of Valhalla, Odin's great hall where warriors train endlessly for Ragnarok. Half of the battle dead go to Valhalla under the Valkyries' selection. The other half go to Folkvangr, the field of the goddess Freya. According to Norse tradition, the shimmering light of their armor as they ride across the sky is the cause of the aurora borealis. In Valhalla, they serve mead to the Einherjar, the chosen warriors, as those warriors spend their days fighting, dying, and being resurrected to fight again in preparation for the end of the world. Named Valkyries from the prose, Edda, and various sagas include Brynhildr, Gondul, Skuld, and Geirskogul. In the later Volsunga saga, and in Wagner's operatic interpretation, individual Valkyries develop into fully realized characters with their own wills and tragedies. Earlier Norse sources, however, describe them as more terrifying and corvine, closer to ravens circling a battlefield than to noble warrior women, Gandharvas. The Gandharvas are the celestial musicians of the Hindu heavens, and their music is not simply entertainment, it is a force that can alter human minds. Inhabiting the space between earth and sky in the divine realm of Svarga, they are the male counterparts to the Apsaris and serve as performers in the court of the gods. Their primary duty is to guard the sacred soma, the divine drink of immortality, and they do not share it willingly. Referenced as far back as the Rigveda, they are associated with clouds, rainfall, and fertility, and in early Vedic tradition, there was a belief that brides pass through a symbolic spiritual ownership by the Gandharvas before marriage. Their music carries properties that go beyond beauty. It can cause euphoria, madness, or overwhelming love in those who hear it unprepared. Chitrasena is one of the most prominent individually named Gandharvas, appearing in the Mahabharata as a figure who interacts with the Pandava heroes. What makes the Gandharvas particularly interesting is their dual nature. They are divine, beautiful, and musically gifted, yet they guard something the gods themselves desire and interact with the mortal world in ways that are not always benign. Sidhe. The Ausi are not simply fairies in the storybook sense. They are the remnants of a displaced divine race, and they have never forgiven the displacement. According to Irish mythology, the Tuatha Dé Danann were the supernatural beings who ruled Ireland before the arrival of the Milesians, the ancestors of the Irish people. Defeated in battle, they did not die. They retreated beneath the earth into the fairy mounds called Sidhe, and into a parallel realm where time moves at a completely different rate. One day in their world is commonly described as years in the human world. Humans lured inside rarely return, and those who do find that decades have passed while they felt only hours. The AOC operate by ancient rules that are neither human nor divine. They can be generous or catastrophically dangerous with no warning and no obligation to explain themselves. Their single most consistent weakness is iron, which repels and physically harms them. This is the documented reason behind the practice of hanging iron horseshoes over doorways across Ireland and Scotland, a protective measure that survived into the modern era. The thinning of the boundary between their realm and ours on the night of Samhain became the foundation of the entire Halloween tradition. Tengu. The Tengu of Japanese mythology began as omens of disaster and slowly, over several centuries, became something stranger. Respected protectors of the mountains and secret masters of the sword. Two distinct types exist in the tradition: the Daitengu, who appear in humanoid form with enormous red noses and large wings, and the Kotengu, who are more fully avian, with beaked faces and feathered bodies. They inhabit a spirit realm that overlaps with the deep mountain wilderness, places considered outside ordinary human reality in Shinto belief. Their attitude toward humans shifted dramatically between the Heian and Edo periods, from malevolent kidnappers to ambiguous martial teachers. The legendary swordsman Minamoto no Yoshitsune, one of the most celebrated warriors in Japanese history, is said in tradition to have trained as a boy under the Daitengu leader Sojobo on Mount Kuramas. The Tengu specifically detest arrogance and are known to abduct, humiliate, and disorient those they deem prideful. Buddhist monks who grew too proud of their learning were a particular target in the old stories. Their feather fans, long noses, and mountainside homes made them one of the most visually distinctive supernatural beings in all of East Asian mythology. Peri. The Peri of Persian mythology are among the most tragic figures in any tradition. Beautiful, luminous beings barred from paradise and spending their existence trying to atone for a fall they cannot fully explain. In early Zoroastrian tradition, they were considered malicious and dangerous, aligned with dark forces. By the time of Ferdowsi's Shahnameh and later Persian poetry, they had transformed into something far more sympathetic. Exiled beings of extraordinary beauty who inhabit a luminous intermediate realm, neither heaven nor earth, sustained not by food, but by the fragrance of flowers and perfume. The purer the scent, the more it nourishes them. Their enemies are the divs, demonic beings with whom they wage constant war across their shared metaphysical territory. The sense of longing embedded in Peri mythology, the desire to return to a paradise they can see, but not enter, made them irresistible to Romantic-era European writers. Thomas More's 1817 poem La Larouk brought their legend to wide Western audiences and remains one of the most read retellings. Their name has sometimes been incorrectly claimed as the origin of the English word fairy, though etymologists dispute this connection. Alp. The Alp is the Germanic world's explanation for sleep paralysis, and it is a more sophisticated explanation than most people give it credit for. This spirit inhabits a liminal realm that overlaps specifically with the sleeping human mind. It does not exist in waking reality in the same way that other mythological creatures do. It enters the physical world at night by slipping through keyholes or tiny cracks in walls, then sits on the chest of a sleeping person, causing the sensation of crushing weight, inability to move, and suffocating nightmares. The pressing weight, the inability to breathe, the terrifying visions, Kolbaber, all of it attributed in Germanic and Alpine folk tradition directly to the Alps' physical presence. Its source of power is a magical hat called a Terran Capet. Steal it, and you gain complete power over the creature. When not tormenting sleepers, it travels through the world in the shapes of cats, pigs, butterflies, or snakes, which is why these animals were sometimes regarded with suspicion in Alpine communities. The Alp is etymologically related to the Old English elf and connects to the Scandinavian Mara, all variants of the same ancient explanation for the terrifying experience of waking and finding yourself unable to move. Tuatha Dé Danann. The Tuatha Dé Danann did not merely inhabit Ireland. They built it into something mythological, and when they were finally defeated, they took most of the magic with them. Their name translates roughly to the peoples of the goddess Danu, though the identity of Danu herself is debated in modern scholarship, with some researchers suggesting she may be a later scholarly construction rather than a clearly attested goddess. What is consistent across Irish mythology is their nature. Beings of extraordinary power over craft, nature, magic, and war, who arrived in Ireland in a cloud of mist and brought with them 4 sacred treasures: the spear of Lugh, the sword of Nuada, the cauldron of the Dagda, and the stone of Fal. After defeat by the Milesians, they retreated not into death, but into the other world, Tir na Nog, the land of the young, becoming the Aosi. Their major figures include the Dagda, father of gods and owner of a cauldron that never empties; Lugh, master of every skill; the Morrigan, shape-shifting goddess of war and fate; and Brigid, goddess of fire, healing, and poetry. Their other world is described consistently as a place of eternal youth, feasting, and beauty, where time does not age those within it. Frost giants. The frost giants of Norse mythology are not simply large enemies of the gods. They are the condition that existed before the gods, and they will be the force that ends them. In the Norse creation account, the first being to exist was Ymir, a frost giant formed from the meeting of ice from Niflheim and fire from Muspelheim in the void called Ginnungagap. His body was later used by Odin and his brothers to construct the world. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his skull the sky, and his bones the mountains. The Jötnar, the race of which frost giants are a part, inhabit Jotunheimr, a realm beyond the outer reaches of Yggdrasil, the World Tree. Despite constant warfare between the Aesir gods and the Jötnar, the two groups intermarry and intertwine throughout Norse mythology. Odin, Thor, and Loki all carry Jotun blood or direct connections. This entanglement makes the frost giants something stranger than simple villains. At Ragnarök, according to the Völuspá, a vast army of Jötnar will march across the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, shattering it under their weight, as part of the final destruction of the cosmos. The named frost giants Thrym, Utgard Loki, and Skrymir all appear in the Prose Edda as figures who match or outwit the gods directly. Draugr. The Draugr is not a ghost and not a skeleton. It is a rotting, physically present corpse that refuses, through sheer force of personality, to stay dead. In Icelandic saga literature, the Draugr arises from the body of someone who is particularly greedy, violent, or malevolent in life, animated by that same energy in death. It haunts its own burial mound, hoards the treasure buried with it, and kills anyone who approaches. What makes the Draugr particularly alarming in the sagas is its physical reality. It can be wrestled, it smells of decay, it leaves footprints, and it grows to enormous size when enraged. The creature described in Eyrbyggja, Saga, and Grettis Saga is not a spiritual phenomenon, but a physical catastrophe for whatever community lives nearby. The only permanent solution documented in the sagas is also notably specific. You must physically wrestle the Draugr into submission, behead it, burn the body completely, and scatter the ashes at sea. Any step omitted risks the creature reassembling itself. Glumr, the Draugr of Grettis Saga, is the most famous individual example, and his curse on the hero Grettir drives the rest of that saga's plot. The Draugr represents the Norse fear not of death, but of the dead who won't cooperate with it. Light Elves. The Light Elves of Norse mythology are, according to Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, more beautiful than the sun. And that is almost the entirety of what the surviving primary sources tell us about them. They inhabit Alfheimr, one of the 9 realms arranged along the branches and roots of Yggdrasil, positioned between Asgard and the human world of Midgard. The realm was given as a tooth gift to the god Freyr, a present given to a divine child upon the cutting of their first tooth. Despite their prominence in the cosmological map, the Light Elves appear almost nowhere in the actual mythological narratives of the Eddas. What they contributed to lived practice, however, is well documented. The Alpha Blot, or elf sacrifice, was a real religious observance in Scandinavian folk tradition, a private household ritual performed to honor elves and seek their goodwill for fertility and health. The Dark Elves, or Dukalfar, described as darker than pitch and dwelling underground, are mentioned by Snorri as their opposite, though many scholars believe the Dark Elves and the Dwarves may have been synonymous in earlier tradition, with Snorri imposing a tidier distinction than the original material supports. Nidhogg. Nidhogg is the creature that puts every other monster in Norse mythology into perspective, because every other monster can, in theory, be killed. Nidhogg cannot. Its name means roughly, he who strikes with malice, and it spends the entire lifespan of the cosmos doing exactly one thing, gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose roots and branches hold all 9 realms together. Every bite it takes is a bite out of the structural foundation of existence. This gnawing is counterbalanced by an eagle perched at Yggdrasil's crown, and a squirrel named Ratatoskr runs between them continuously, carrying insults from one to the other to keep the conflict alive and the chewing ongoing. The Völuspá and Grimnismal both describe Nidhogg in detail. Its realm is Nastrund, the corpse shore within Niflheim, where the worst of the dead, oathbreakers, murderers, and adulterers wade through rivers of venom. In the Völuspá's account of Ragnarok, after the destruction of the gods and the world and nearly everything else, Nidhogg is described as flying across the ruined sky with corpses clutched in its wings. Everything else ends. The dragon continues. Dragon Kings. The Dragon Kings of Chinese mythology are not simply large serpents. They are divine administrators, each governing one of the 4 seas from an underwater palace of impossible grandeur. Guang rules the East Sea, and his dragon palace, described in the classic novel Journey to the West, is built from coral, jade, and crystal, its halls filled with centuries of treasure accumulated from the sea floor. The 4 Dragon Kings together control rainfall, rivers, and weather across the entire world, which means drought and flood are not natural events in this cosmological framework. They are policy decisions. When rain does not come, you petition the Dragon King. In Journey to the West, Guang reluctantly provides the weapon that defines the entire story. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, visits his palace and walks out with the Ruyi Jingu Bang, a magical golden staff that can change size at will and weighs 13,500 Jinn, according to the novel's text. The Dragon Kings can take human form and frequently interact with mortal heroes and emperors throughout Chinese literary tradition. Their mythology blended Taoist, Buddhist, and folk traditions over many centuries, which is why descriptions of their palaces and powers vary depending on which text and which era you consult. Asuras. The Asuras of Hindu mythology are one of the most misunderstood categories of supernatural being in any tradition, largely because translating them simply as demons loses almost everything important about them. In the earliest Vedic texts, the word Asura actually meant powerful lord and was applied positively to major gods including Varuna. The negative connotation developed gradually over centuries as the theology shifted. The Asuras and Devas, the gods, shared the same origin. Both races were born from the creator god Prajapati, making them cosmic siblings in permanent conflict. Their realm is Patalu, the underworld, described in texts like the Bhagavata Purana as actually magnificent, full of jewels, abundant food, and extraordinary beauty, a place the Narada sage visits and declares more beautiful than heaven. The pivotal event connecting Asuras and Devas is the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the cosmic ocean, in which both sides cooperated to produce Amrita, the nectar of immortality, then immediately fought over it. That single event produced Lakshmi, the divine physician Dhanvantari, the deadly poison Halahala, swallowed by Shiva to save existence, and the nectar itself. Hiranyakashipu, Vritra, and Mahishasura, whose defeat by the goddess Durga is celebrated at Navratri, are among the most famous individuals. Tengri sky spirits. In Mongolic and Turkic shamanic tradition, the sky is not where gods live. The sky itself is divine, alive, and conscious. Tengri, the eternal blue sky, is not a being who inhabits a realm, but a realm that is itself a being. And the 99 sky spirits, also called Tengri, exist within it as expressions of its will, though the exact number and arrangement of these spirits vary significantly between different Mongolic and Turkic traditions. According to Mongolian cosmology, 55 benevolent Tengri dwell in the west, and 44 more aggressive Tengri in the east, a division that reflects a fundamental tension built into the structure of the cosmos. Shamans, called Bu, travel to this realm not by dying, but by entering trance states, ascending via a world tree or sacred mountain to communicate with these beings on behalf of their communities. The realm itself is not a place of the dead, it is the source of all life force, protection, and blessing for the living. Before every major military campaign, Chinggis Khan reportedly invoked Tengri directly, attributing his victories to divine mandate from the eternal blue sky. The hero king Geser, central to both Tibetan and Mongolian epic tradition, is described as a being sent down from Tengri's realm specifically to protect humanity from chaos. Yokai of Kakuryō. Kakuryō, the hidden world of Japanese Shinto tradition, is not a distant realm you travel to after death. It is the invisible layer of reality that exists directly alongside the visible world, separated by a boundary that thins at specific times of year and in specific places. The supernatural beings that inhabit it, collectively called yokai, are not a single species but an enormous and deeply varied taxonomy of creatures, each with its own individual name, appearance, behavior, and rules. Among the most significant are the kitsune, fox spirits who accumulate tails as they age. A nine-tailed kitsune is a being of immense, almost divine power and wisdom, while a one-tailed kitsune is young and mischievous. The tanuki, raccoon dog spirits, are shapeshifters associated with luck and deception. The boundary between Kakuryō and the human world thins specifically during Obon, the summer festival of the dead, when ancestral spirits are believed to briefly return. Lanterns are floated on rivers to guide them back. The scholar and artist Toriyama Sekien produced illustrated encyclopedias of yokai in the 18th century that remain definitive references, and the Hyakumonogatari Kaidenkai, the 100 ghost stories tradition, served as an earlier cataloging effort. Most yokai cannot survive prolonged exposure to the human world and must return or risk corruption. Elementals. The four elementals, gnomes, undines, sylphs, and salamanders, are not ancient mythology, but a 16th century philosophical framework that has proven remarkably durable. The Swiss alchemist and physician Paracelsus introduced this system in his Liber de Nymphis, written around 1530, as an attempt to categorize the living intelligences he believed inhabited each of the four classical elements. Gnomes move through solid earth as naturally as humans move through open air, inhabiting a realm of rock and root entirely impenetrable to human senses. Undines inhabit water and are described as closely resembling humans, fluid and emotional in nature. Sylphs occupy the air, specifically the atmospheric space between air and fire, and are said to be the most intelligent of the four types, though also the most difficult to perceive. Salamanders live inside flame itself and cannot be harmed by heat. Fire without a salamander is, in Paracelsus's framework, simply inert matter. He distinguished them from spirits, demons, and angels specifically. They are mortal. They die when separated from their element, but they do not have immortal souls in his theological framework. The system was later adopted into Rosicrucianism and ceremonial magic traditions, which is largely why it survived and eventually shaped so much of Western fantasy's elemental creature vocabulary. Jinn. The Jinn are not a folklore invention. They are a theologically serious category of being explicitly described in the Quran, which dedicates an entire chapter to them. Surah al-Jinn, chapter 72, 28 verses long. According to Islamic theology, the Jinn are a third category of conscious creation alongside humans and angels made by God from smokeless fire. They inhabit an unseen realm called al-Ghaib that exists parallel to the human world. They can perceive humans, but humans normally cannot perceive them. They have free will, form their own societies, practice their own religions, and will face divine judgment in the afterlife just as humans do. Meaning there are Muslim Jinn, Christian Jinn, and Jinn who reject all religion entirely. The Islamic tradition identifies multiple types, including the Marid, associated with water and considered among the most powerful, the Ifrit, fiery and rebellious, the Ghoul, which shapeshifts and haunts graves, and the Seelie, master of disguise. According to both the Quran and subsequent tradition, the prophet Solomon, was granted the ability to command armies of jinn, using them in construction and warfare. The bottle-bound wish-granting genie of Western popular culture is a simplification of this rich and theologically nuanced tradition, so extreme as to be nearly unrecognizable. Unseelie Court. The Unseelie Court does not need a reason to hurt you. That is the defining feature that separates them from the Seelie Court in Scottish folklore, where the Seelie may harm humans who offend them, the Unseelie harm humans as a matter of preference and temperament. They inhabit a realm beneath hills, in mist-covered valleys, and beneath dark lake surfaces, a world of impossible cold beauty where time runs at its own pace, and human visitors do not return unchanged, if they return at all. Their most terrifying manifestation is the Sluagh, the wild host, a ghostly procession that rides through the night sky, according to tradition coming from the west, sweeping up souls and occasionally living humans in its passage. Those taken by the Unseelie who do manage to return to the human world are described consistently across Scottish folklore as changed in specific ways, speaking in riddles, unable to eat human food, and withering steadily over a matter of weeks. Despite their malevolence, they remain bound by ancient rules. They cannot enter a home where iron is present, and a bargain once made cannot be broken. That last detail is the one thread of hope in every Unseelie story. If you can get one to agree to terms, it will keep them. Getting one to agree to favorable terms is the problem. Baku. The Baku is a creature assembled from leftover pieces, and that origin story perfectly explains what it does. According to Japanese tradition, when the gods finish creating all the animals, they use the remaining parts to construct one final being: an elephant's trunk, a tiger's paws, an ox's tail, and tiger's eyes assembled into a single chimeric spirit that exists at the boundary between the dream world and waking reality. Its food is nightmares. A person who wakes from a bad dream can invoke the Baku by repeating a request for it to eat the dream, drawing the creature through the boundary between its liminal realm and the sleeping mind to consume the residue of fear. This sounds entirely beneficial until you learn the danger. An overly greedy or frequent invocation risks the Baku consuming not just the nightmares, but all dreams, including the good ones. Those stripped of all their dreams are described as being left with hollow ambitions and an empty future, a life drained of possibility. Protective images of the Baku were historically placed on pillowcases and carved on bedroom screens in Japan during the Muromachi period. The creature entered Japanese popular culture through Chinese texts before being adapted and significantly redesigned over centuries. The Baku of modern Japanese fiction looks almost nothing like the original chimeric form. Rusalka. The Rusalka are beautiful, and they are very specifically dangerous to the people who made them what they are. In Slavic mythology, a Rusalka is the spirit of a young woman who died violently, drowned, or who died before marriage. The incompleteness of her life becomes the energy that anchors her to a watery realm between the living world and the afterlife. She inhabits rivers and lakes, emerging at night to sit on the bank or swing from willow branches, luring men into the water to drown them. The motivation is not arbitrary cruelty, it is unfinished business. A murdered Rusalka needs her killer punished, an abandoned one needs to be married. The peace she cannot find in death she pursues through the living world. Once a year, during Rusalka week, a late spring observance falling around Pentecost, they are believed to come ashore in greater numbers, dancing in meadows and swinging from trees. During this week, they could make crops grow but also spread illness among those who did not observe the proper rituals to appease them. Antonin Dvořák's 1901 opera. Rusalka brought the legend to wide international audiences, but the creature in Slavic folklore is considerably colder and less romantic than that staging suggests. Aswang. The Aswang is the most feared creature in Philippine folklore, and part of what makes it so effective as a source of dread is that it looks exactly like your neighbor until dark. By day, it is indistinguishable from a normal human being. At night, it transforms. The specific form varies by regional tradition across the Visayas and Tagalog regions, but the most documented variant is the Manananggal, a creature that separates its upper body from its lower half at the waist, sprouts large bat wings, and flies with its entrails trailing beneath it to hunt pregnant women. It uses a long, hollow tongue to drain the blood or consume the fetus from a distance through the roof of a house. The strategy for killing a Manananggal is precise. Find the separated lower half before dawn, when the two halves must rejoin, and pour salt or ash on the open wound, preventing reattachment and killing the creature permanently. Garlic, vinegar, and religious items repel Aswang in general. The tik-tik is a related variant whose call is particularly disorienting. It sounds distant when the creature is actually close and grows quieter as it approaches. According to some historians, Spanish colonial authorities in the Philippines may have deliberately amplified Aswang mythology to discourage rural populations from being outdoors at night, though this claim requires further verification. What is undisputed is that the Aswang mythology survived and deepened across centuries of colonial contact, remaining one of the most vivid and actively believed supernatural traditions in the modern Philippines. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.